Hi, this is Andre. Repitching is changing the pitch of a loop without changing its speed or length. Melodic repitching is changing the pitch in specific musical intervals so that you can literally play it like a musical instrument. We're going to be looking at melodic repitching on the Chase Bliss Blooper in this video. To make that happen, we're also going to be using an Arturia beat step and the Empress Zoia. Now, in this particular video, the Zoia is not doing anything other than passing the MIDI signal from the beat step to the blooper. And the blooper needs some fairly specific connections to be made as far as how it can receive MIDI signals. So we're going to do the demonstration first, then we're going to get into some very geeky talk about how these three components are working with each other, why they're configured in the particular way that they are, and different options you have as far as making this sort of thing happen. So getting MIDI successfully sent to the Blooper is a little more involved than some devices I've looked at. The main thing is that it seems like the Blooper needs to receive its MIDI signals from a powered MIDI source. I tried running a MIDI connection directly from the beat step to the Blooper. That did not work. I tried running other non-powered sources, the regular MIDI outputs from other things that I have. That didn't work. The Zoia does work. And I've seen other videos talking about how the Zoia can connect directly to the Blooper without any kind of powered interface. I know Chase Bliss has a device called the MIDI box that is specifically designed to take MIDI signals from the outside world and then send those to their pedals, and I know the MIDI box is a powered interface. So I was very lucky to already have an Empress Zoia before I got my hands on a Blooper. I'd already seen some documentation saying that you can run a connection directly from the Zoia to the Blooper without needing anything in the middle, so that's what I've been doing. As far as the particulars of how you send the MIDI signal, there are a couple of options. What I was doing was taking the 1/8 inch TRS output from the Zoia, using one of these adapters, which came with the Zoia. And then I was sending that into this, which is a custom cable made by Disaster Area. This is a cable specifically designed to interface MIDI with Chase Bliss pedals. Now, I tried a few other connections, a few other types of MIDI cables, did not have a lot of luck. I think I was able to get a Type B TRS to 1/8 inch to 1/8 inch working, and then I used an old headphone adapter to get that to a 1/4 inch, because for the Blooper you need a 1/4 inch input for the MIDI input right there. But for me, my preference is just to have one cable that I know will do the job, that I don't have to think about. MIDI is pretty important to me as far as doing looping stuff, so I got the Disaster Area cable. It's been working fine, as long as it comes from a powered MIDI source like the Zoia. I'll have a link to the Disaster Area cable in the description below. You're certainly welcome to try other types of cables if you want to, but your mileage may vary. There is another way to connect the Zoia through MIDI to the Blooper, which is using the control port, which is this connection here. And the control port is kind of like a multi-purpose connection. And one of the options in the global preferences for the Zoia is that you can configure it to be a MIDI out. And what I was able to do was take a stereo 1/4 inch to 1/4 inch, take this out of the control port on the Zoia and send this in to the MIDI input on the Blooper, and that worked fine too. The reason I prefer not to do that is very geeky and kind of ridiculous. I like the idea of having the control port available to receive an expression pedal. So the control port does a lot of different things. You can plug an expression pedal into it, and then you can assign the expression pedal to send any kind of MIDI message you want. So I like the idea of being able to do that and have the expression pedal as a MIDI controller in addition to running other MIDI signals from it. You could also use the built-in expression controller input on the Blooper. The reason I prefer not to do that is, again, very geeky and very specialized. I like a lot of the things that the built-in ramping on the Blooper does by itself, and my understanding is that if you plug in an expression pedal to the expression and CV input, that basically overrides the ramping on the Blooper. So basically, I wanted to be able to do all the things with all the things and not worry about having an expression pedal going into the expression input on the Blooper and having that override ramping if I want to use ramping. Realistically, I'm probably not going to need to do all this stuff at the same time, but I like having my options open. Now, here's a couple of details about the actual MIDI information we were sending. The modifiers on the Blooper have continuous controllers assigned to them. For the pitcher controller that we were using, that we were doing the primary repitching with, the original pitch is value 64 on that particular continuous controller. I think it's continuous controller 19. Check my Blooper manual. Modifier B is continuous controller 19. So if you send continuous controller 19 with a value of 64, that is playing the loop back at its original pitch. Now, in between 0 and 127 are all the other possible pitches that you can repitch to over MIDI. I found that doing an octave above the original pitch, I was able to get the intervals pretty much in tune. Some of them are out of tune by a few cents, but to my ear, take that with all the grains of salt you need to, but to my ear, it sounds acceptably in tune. When I tried to repitch down from the original pitch descending, I started running into trouble, and there were certain intervals that I wasn't able to hit without them being pretty out of tune. and the way that the different values for the continuous controller lined up, I wasn't able to find a specific CC value that would correspond to a particular interval being in tune. So that's the main reason that we were looking at using the speed controller to drop everything down an octave and then do repitching from that. It's not exactly the same as repitching below the original pitch because you're dropping it down an octave, and using the speed controller that also makes it go half as fast, but it's a pretty close approximation, and for me it's more than enough to get that kind of thing happening. Now, it's possible that you can scale that information to make it more fine. I would not be at all surprised if there are some things you can do with the Zoia as far as fine-tuning the information to get it more properly lined up. I'm not like an expert with the Zoia by any means, and at some point I'm probably going to ask some of the Zoia intelligentsia if they have any advice on ways to go about doing that. I also haven't really tried very much as far as repitching using the CV input. It's possible that using CV control you can get finer gradations that will get you more accurate pitches above and below the original pitch if you're dividing the modifier using CV connections rather than a MIDI continuous controller. That's yet to be determined by me. So this is the first blooper video I've done. I just got my hands on it very recently. Chase Bliss gave me a very nice discount when I reached out to them, so thank you very much for making that happening, Chase Bliss. And I'm still working my way around it, still figuring it out, still trying to find out not just what I can do with it in a creative sense, but also trying to find angles on it that haven't been covered in other videos, because Blooper's been out for 2 or 3 years. There's a lot of content on it, and I would like to try and contribute something more than just another demo of somebody playing with a blooper. So I'm still in the relatively early stages, but I'm really enjoying it. It's a great device, needless to say. I'm always happy to add modifications in the description below or on screen here if anybody notices any details that I'm talking about that seem a little fishy. So please feel free to correct me if you think that anything I'm saying is unclear or incorrect. In the meantime, thank you for tuning in, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.